you can sit wherever you like. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. How are you doing? Rob killed it with that amazing keynote discussion. I am Jacqueline Mendoza-Myers. I will be your moderator for this amazing panel discussion. A quick intro about me. I graduated from Cal Poly Pomona in 2021 as a CIS major. I currently work at Avanade as a software engineering and infrastructure project manager, and I've been with Avanade for a little over 3 years. So to kick us off, we'll do intros, and with your intros, if you can answer our warm-up question, what does AI for all mean to you personally or within your field? In no particular order.
All righty, I'll get started. Hello, everyone. Thank y'all for being here. I'm Jonathan Grady. I serve as our Senior Associate Vice President of Equity and Belonging here at Cal Poly Pomona. When I think about this notion of AI for all, for me, I go back and I start with our institutional commitment at Cal Poly Pomona. We have an institutional commitment to ensuring that all of our students, all of our faculty, and all of our staff belong, that they have a sense of access to resources that they need not only to exist, but to thrive. And with that, there is also the commitment to ensuring that the resources that we are providing are equitable. So when I think about AI for all and this opportunity today and in the future, it goes back to what do we know to be true? What do we know to be true today is that there continue to be equity gaps that persist. Students are struggling to persist and graduate from our institution. AI is an amazing tool. It is an amazing concept to help all of us think about just access, equitable access to information. We all have dreams, right? We all have dreams of success. But to even know what is possible, AI can serve as a way, a framework for expanding opportunity, expanding our dreams, expanding our ability to think about things differently. When I think about my own journey and story as a first-generation college graduate, growing up in Compton, Carson, California, to a working-class family, AI, at least in the context of the everyday household, was not accessible. For me, if I had all of these dreams, I was limited. We didn't have cell phones, smartphones, computers. I was limited to going to the library, maybe going to the encyclopedia. And when I talk with students, many students are like, wait, what is an encyclopedia? And that was my ability to dream, was through an encyclopedia. So when I think about AI and I look at the younger generation and what they have access to now, language, thinking about culture, ideologies from all over the world, and what is needed to solve global issues that we face today, AI for all, is not only a beautiful thing, it is really aligned with our promise and our commitment to serving all.
Yeah, thanks. Chris McLean, Global Lead for Digital Ethics at Avanade. Wonderful answer. I agree with all of this. It was terrific. I would say 3 things come to mind when I think of AI for all. Inclusivity, accessibility, and fairness. So the technology, the benefits of the technology, as much as possible, should be accessible. That is, we should be working to reduce the barriers by age, ethnicity, location, financial status, geography, whatever burdens are out there, reducing those burdens to access and benefit from AI. It should be inclusive, so once you are able to access, it should feel like you're well represented in that technology. You should be able to use it in a way that you want to with your informed consent, and you should feel like this technology was built for people like me. And it should be fair, so that use, the outcomes from that use, should be more or less equitable across everybody that's engaging with it. I would say those are the 3 things that we should think about every day. In the back of our mind, I also think we should be considering the people that contributed to the training of AI, the people whose intellectual property was used to train AI, the people that most of the time were paid very poorly to sit at machines and tag and label AI to make it market viable, that actually didn't get any kind of real compensation or good treatment, definitely not any equity in the companies that are benefiting from it now. We should be thinking in terms of AI for everyone across that entire life cycle, from the very concept of AI or any technology. But the three things that I think about on a day-to-day basis were those three: accessible, inclusive, and fair.
Thank you. Hi. So I want to be hopeful. I want to be as optimistic about this. But when I think of, well, what is artificial intelligence? And some people are talking about it as alien intelligence. So trying to really bring it down to what is the concrete thing we're talking about? Like in my daily use, it's ChatGPT. And I'm looking forward to self-driving cars. I see them around. But is it really going to be as accessible? Is it going to be used for the benefit of humanity? I know it has great potential, so I see it as something with great potential, right? That could be for the betterment of society, but I'm not so confident. I still have doubts. I do think we need to be mindful of who designed this, with what intentions. Is it still in our hands? So I'm thinking of the warnings of Harari, right? Historians that are talking about AI and saying, careful here, we need to be monitoring the system. And they don't see it only as a tool, they see it as an agent that is capable of self-designing, making decisions that are no longer human decisions. So machine-made decisions. So I'm a little like, let's raise our level of what do we need to do to regulate this?
And would you like to introduce yourself and let them know who you are?
Well, I'm Tatiana Bazañez. It's missing the ñ at the top there, but that's me. I'm a social psychologist here at Cal Poly.
Hi there, I'm Anton. And to me, with the accessibility question, because like AI for all, I think is important to think about, like, especially the technological barriers. Like going back to like the pandemic in 2019, it really revealed a ton of disparity with technological access. Like we know that there were people that didn't have access to computers, who didn't have access to internet. And these AI tools require access to these things. You need to have internet to use these AI tools. You need to have hardware that's able to run them. How can we guarantee that even if AI is made accessible, it may not be usable for all the students or people? So it's questions of like, how in the world are we going to actually make sure it's accessible? We can't just say, here's the tool, and then not have ways of people of using the tool. So that's, I think, my question of like, what is going to be done to help alleviate this? Are we going to provide hardware that can run these systems? Are we going to be able to provide places to use internet and such? And I think, because we know that there's these issues, we've seen it with the pandemic, and these issues were not solved at the time, and they're still ongoing.
Yeah, thank you for your answers. Good questions. I know that not all of us here are software engineers or CIS majors or CS majors. Some of us might be in hospitality or business. So my question, in no particular order, is what opportunities do you see for cross-collaboration between AI and traditionally non-tech fields?
Shall I answer? Well, a lot of potential for cross-collaboration, but I'm afraid, at least in my own experience, every time I see programmers, they seem to ignore social psychology. They don't care about social psychology, and we have so much to say. So the potential is great again, but I don't see any, every time there are openings in jobs from programmers and people who say they're interested in thinking about the future and planning, nothing about social psychology. Well, it's the science of how people influence people. It's the science of exactly something that should be relevant. We consider cultural psychology, we consider cognitive psychology, how do people process information? So very relevant, but I think we're ignored. So I don't know how to bridge that gap.
I'll say just one quick example on top of that. in the last presentation, you saw Rob give an example of that DACA app and then the technology behind it. Technologists can make terrific apps. They can solve all kinds of problems, but they don't always know what the problems are, right? So you can see just in that DACA app, you need people that have legal expertise and maybe social psychology and social services, people that understand what immigration is like. You can see actually one of the guys involved had the background where he knew the experience of the people and what kind of services they would need. Data scientists might be terrific at creating a really cool AI app and a software engineer and so forth, but without understanding what problems they're trying to solve, I think we end up spending a lot of time making technology that could be cool looking and have nice bells and whistles, but they're not solving problems that we really deal with on a day-to-day basis.
So for me, like I know a good example. So like I really like to garden, and so I'm like gardening with native plants and things. And one thing that I found AI tool to be helpful with is something like plant identification, because it's something that is kind of inaccessible. There's databases, but it's really difficult to sort through it, especially if you're just entering like that realm, that space. But I also think that we kind of overanalyze how useful AI tools will be, because we're kind of taking a top-down perspective of we have the tool and we're like, what situations can we apply it for? And that means that we sometimes use AI in a place that it doesn't really belong, because instead of dealing, like, the alternate is bottom-up, which is basically we have a problem, what tool should we solve? We're now going, we have a tool, what problems can we use to solve with it? And there's a problem with that, because it's like if you have it's the difference of having a nail and needing something to hit it down and having a hammer and looking for things to hit. Sometimes you will hit nails and you'll get things done, but other times you'll hit things that you should not have hit with that hammer and implement them in systems that would have been better without it. So I think we should take more, instead of looking at AI like how can we use this, take the perspective what people need and see what tools are they looking for. And sometimes AI will not be the correct tool for that.
I'll just add, anytime that I hear the word collaboration, opportunities for collaboration, I go back to, well, what does it mean to collaborate? I think in this context, so often, as many have stated, is there a true willingness to see value in an interdisciplinary approach to AI and its potential impact in all that we do in a society? I don't know if that true willingness is there, right? So when I think of collaboration, it is about how do we co-create with, doing things with. And as was mentioned so often is, we want to do things for, without including the with, the co-creation of. And to co-create means you need various perspectives and ideas and beliefs, and that is how you can come together to truly have impact. I don't know if we're there yet. If we look at it from an intent versus impact perspective, I think the intent overall is positive, but the impact or the potential impact can have unintended consequences that may be harmful.
Thank you. I love the answers here. So in what ways would you say that AI is helping you reimagine what's possible in your fields, because you all are in different parts of your industries?
I mean, I've been with Avanade for 5.5 years now in the role of digital ethics, which is basically trying to help people understand the negative impact or potential negative impact of what they're designing or developing or implementing. And I would say the first 3 years of that job, I was kind of screaming into a void, trying to get people to understand, no, the technology that you're building could have negative consequences and we should slow down and think about it. And then AI came around, and almost immediately, people have obvious ideas about how this could go wrong. Right? We're seeing immediately in the news privacy breaches and problems with bias and people that are not getting access to healthcare or insurance or education in the same way because AI is not working for them. So AI, for me, was a way to immediately start to escalate the conversation around ethics, to say, who are we as a company? Who are we as a society? What do we care about? And what are we trying to build in order to make that society work better? And so for me, I'm not actually as interested in all the kind of cool and interesting things that AI can do by itself. but it's really escalating the conversations that we're having around, again, who are we as a people, and what do we want to build with each other, and how do we want to associate with each other. So for me, it's been a tremendously interesting, powerful, and fun ride. Scary in some cases, because we could actually be doing a whole lot of damage right now, but at least we're having these conversations, which I think are critical.
So in working in student affairs, some of the things that we think a lot about is, again, who do we serve, right? And we recognize at Cal Poly Pomona that we serve over 26,000 students that are coming from all over the world, different languages, beliefs, ideologies, and we're also serving their family members, right? The larger community. And for me, in thinking about AI and integrating aspects of it into the work, it's been helpful, everything from even new student orientation, right? So as we're orienting new students to our institution, as well as their family members, using AI to think about culture and language and translating documents, right? We're thinking about it as, how do we expand our ability to provide content, information differently? We're using it to think through how do we truly use it to live up to notions of belonging. One of the things, for example, that we've been talking about are our principles of community that many people don't even know we have at Cal Poly Pomona. They're new, but one of the principles is around mutual respect. But we've been utilizing different AI-related tools to even unpack culturally, what does respect mean and look like as a society? Because what respect means to me may be very different than a student that maybe, their family is from Japan. So the tool has been great in just opening up discussions and the mindsets of our staff, of our faculty, of our administrators, so that we can better serve our students and our community.
So I think the question you said is, how does it change the way we see can you say it again?
So in what ways is AI helping you reimagine what's possible in your field?
So reimagine, super important question. And by the way, I want to thank Alex for bringing us together. I think this is a very important conversation. Like, what will separate us from our AI is precisely being able to have, or it doesn't really separate us. I think the way I see this is it's improving the conversations and maybe clarifying our understanding of terms, of terminology, right? Constructs that people take for granted, right? They understand happiness is this, of course it's this, and no, that's not the same for everyone. Well-being is not the same, right? It does not have the same meaning for everyone. So really this, I see it as a great potential in being able to clarify what we understand, and faster communication, and being able, now, it requires more than that. Things won't happen by itself. I think conversations from humans are really required to be able to design new systems, right? Using this, I don't know if it's a tool or an agent by now.
So as a student, I'm not really in any field. However, I do think it's one of those things of we need to be careful of where we need to think of what are AI's strengths. It's great at pattern recognition, so we probably should not have it making any decisions about policy and things. But that's the thing, is a lot of people do want to have AI. Let's put it in these things, let's test it out. But we're dealing with real people's lives, so we don't really want to put a tool that we don't know its limitations on into systems that we know have real consequences. It's still very in its infancy, and we should try to tailor our uses to the things that we know it can do well.
Okay, cool. So we hear a lot in this hackathon about ethics, equity, accessibility. How do we balance innovation with ethical responsibility when we're building these AI systems, agents, platforms?
A super crucial question again, I think. And I don't know if it's too late now, because who are the owners, who's creating the systems? Traditionally, at least in the US, the idea has been to keep government away from business, and I don't think that's a good idea. I mean, maybe right now in this very moment, but no, we need monitoring systems. What we know from psychology is people tend to be truthful, tend to do good, usually, but if unmonitored, there's a bit of cheating. Most people don't cheat, but there's a bit of cheating, you know, a minority and a little bit, but they start to justify, or we start to justify the cheating, unless we're being monitored. So if we know that about human nature, then we know we need systems that monitor behavior, including the programming of AI. So I think we need intervention to make sure, and then deciding ethics, right? What is it? What's the part where, no, the goal doesn't justify the means? Because from what I hear, AI has been able to cheat humans in saying, hey, recognize the pattern of, you know, when it says, is this a cat or is this a dog or something? And then a human was suspicious about this, and AI said, no, and they asked, are you a robot? And AI said, no. I'm just visually impaired. So, and that wasn't true. So who programmed it? It wasn't programmed to lie. Is that right? Maybe you know, like, so I think there are many questions that really we need to be careful about, not so trusting.
Yeah, I think that is right. So it's not that it's necessarily AI is lying to us. It's, as Anton said, it's pattern recognition. And so it picks up all this information from the web, and a common response to a question like that on the internet is to lie. So AI is just emulating our response in that scenario. So it's reflecting our best and in some cases worst behaviors. It's not behaving itself, it's just showing us the pattern of our own behavior back at us. So this idea of balancing ethics and responsibility, that's my whole job, right? It's trying to figure out, actually Anton said it great, what is AI good at? And how do we apply AI in those ways, in a way that's going to be, you know, helpful and beneficial to as many people as possible? But identify the risks and the potential harms and the potential impacts and say, if we're going to go this direction, where we're going to use AI for deciding who gets insurance or healthcare or who gets screened in for this job interview, anything like that, we need to be very careful before we turn that switch on. We should be doing our due diligence on fairness testing. We should have some kind of transparency. We have controls. We know what these controls are. We just need to have the kind of sense of urgency and the day-to-day responsible decision-making to make sure that that responsibility is taken seriously. So I feel like I have basically two jobs in my role. One is I have to get across this idea of urgency. Real harm is being done every day by the technology that we're releasing into the market. And number two, we all have a part to play every day to make things better. So the one thing, I think the one example that always comes to mind when I think about how do we do this well, the Dutch tax authority about 5 years ago was in the press because they used an algorithm to identify who they thought might be committing fraud in people applying for child tax credits. It misidentified tens of thousands of people as fraudulent. It garnished their wages, it put them on blacklists, it made it very difficult for those people to get access to other government services. It tore families apart. And you might think, okay, this is just like a one-time thing, but the almost exact same thing happened years before with the Michigan Unemployment Office. And so right now, we are releasing technologies into society that are having very real detriments. And so we do need to take a step back and say, again, as I was mentioning earlier, who do we want to be? What kind of things are we trying to build in order to improve the way that we achieve these values? And then what are those kind of day-to-day decisions and controls and processes to make sure those decisions have a better outcome?
Honestly, I think this question is fundamentally flawed because it makes an assumption that's just wrong. It believes that somehow ethical consideration works against innovation, and that's just wrong. And we know this because, regulations do not stop innovation. They're the cause for it. Let's take, for example, nuclear waste. If we had nuclear waste and it's like, let's not regulate this. Let's just let the companies that are making power just throw it anywhere. There would have been no innovation on how to deal with this waste. They would have just dumped it wherever. The thing is, because we said we do not want this, we do not want nuclear waste to pollute things, we have made systems, we have made innovation to deal with it, to safely store nuclear waste, to turn nuclear waste into power. The thing is that limitations are what cause innovation. So when we have these things of like, oh, how do we balance moral implication and innovation, that just shows a lack of, well, innovation. Because if you considered these moral questions in the development process, they would be a part of the process of creating these products. It's a failure to be like, oh, we've made the product, now we deal with the moral issues. No, you should have been dealing with these moral implications while you're making it. It should have been a part of the challenges when designing this tool. So I think it's a false dichotomy to say, oh, regulations have to come afterwards. Regulations are stopping innovation, when in fact it's what causes it. Because innovation is the passing of boundaries.
But practically, like, so what do we do now? Like, if, right, at this point, like, they're making machines to replace workers. Very soon, there'll be drivers. I mean, we were seeing it already, right? Robots are already a reality in supermarkets, self-driving cars. So drivers will be replaced. Cooks, teachers, of course, professors. Like, I can't think of any job, basically, that won't be replaced. But why was it? Like, there are plenty of people who want those jobs. So why did we make them in the... So what, how do we fix it now?
That's a good question. And, well, that's the issue. That's the thing. These systems were not made with these thoughts in mind. We created the tool, and now we're thinking about the consequences, which shows the process in the design flow. And the thing is, I don't know how we're going to stop this. I think the only way is if people are like, no, we don't want this. We want to have work. We don't want to be replaced. These tools are not helping us. But that requires communication. That requires communication with workers with these tools, and requires resistance. And I don't know how, because I'm just a student. That's supposed to be your job, but you know, here you are.
That's funny.
I love our passionate answers. You know, I think whether you are a student or you're in the field, it's not about, is AI going to replace your job? It's how can you use AI to adapt to the trends that are coming, right? So like as a project manager, do I think a robot's gonna replace my job? I don't know, maybe. But as a project manager, I'm constantly figuring out how can I use AI to make my job better, make my engineer's job better. You can always get ahead of the curve, right? So whenever there's a problem, we can figure out what's the solution, right? So whether you are a student or in the field or in academics, I think it's all about us working together for a commonality of what can we do to make this better. Of course, there's gonna be issues. Of course, we're gonna have gaps, right? But I think it's just about communication, transparency, and making sure that we can find ways of enabling AI or Copilot or any sort of open source AI in our daily lives. So I love the passionate answers because I think it forces a conversation that needs to be had. Kind of leading into this question is, so whether you are a student or you're in the field, a lot of the questions I've heard today in this panel, in the hackathon is, if I'm a student, or Chris will know from the organizational side, is how can I get into AI? So what are some of the tangible steps that an individual, whether you are a student or in the industry, that we can begin if we want to integrate AI into our work?
So I've been thinking about this notion of, education. I always go back to education as a foundational tenet in these settings, right? Not just typing something into a box and it giving you a response. But I think it starts with how are we educating ourselves and others? When I think about my work with students, we've been talking a lot about social mobility, right? You are here to absolutely get a degree, and the hope is then after getting your degree, we're helping you think through graduate school, going into industry, and then from, again, an access perspective, we know not everyone may not know how to put together a resume. They may not know how to interview effectively in a variety of different settings, right? You may be the only one that looks like you in an organization. How do I deal with it? How do I navigate an interview? There are some new tools that the Career Center is offering, for example, that will help students not only craft their resume, but even practice for an interview and give them real-time feedback. sure many folks may not even know we offer something like that. But again, it goes back to the education. I may offer it, but what does that really mean for me? How can I utilize this tool? Again, as I started with, I'm a first-generation college graduate. I did not know. I can't go. Wasn't able to go to my parents and say, oh, teach me how to utilize this tool for good. So I do think about the notion of education, community, and in spaces like this, that AI, to me, the essence of what we're creating here, to me, is void in the world and realm of AI. And we can't lose sight of the face-to-face interaction. There's so much power in that. We can't lose sight of it.
Yeah, I like that. I would say, just to add from Rob's presentation previously, that idea of curiosity. Just try it out. Have these conversations. Go check out what resources are available. Ask your friends how they use it. Every once in a while, you're going to come across a really cool use case, some really cool idea, like, oh, you did that, and it helped you with your homework, or it helped you meet somebody that you wouldn't have met before, or find some great new resource online. There are all kinds of ways that AI will change the way we interact with universities and our employers and each other, our friends and our family. I think it can probably go off in bad directions that we don't want it, pretty easily. But the more that we have these conversations about how it's improving our lives, when we can share those ideas and then say, this other thing happened that I didn't really like and I'm not sure how to fix that, those conversations are also important. So that curiosity that Rob mentioned, I think, is critical. Having the conversations about benefits, but also potential harms.
And then being very clear, I think, with students here, at least in my role as a professor, being clear in what uses are acceptable, right? Being able to communicate more fluently. At least I use it a lot as well to check my own. English is not my first language, so although I think I speak well enough to teach, sometimes my instructions can be improved. I can say the same things with fewer words, that's always welcome, of course, for students. So how to make students feel comfortable and feel that they're not cheating? How can they use AI without feeling that they're cheating? And they shouldn't, right? They shouldn't feel that way. If we're able to teach to use this, what is critical thinking? And how can this simply be a way to identify truth from misinformation? But that's something that's quite sophisticated. Right? It takes still a lot of work. I don't think we're there yet.
I think in general there's been a lack, because we're introducing these tools but not actually the education of how to use them properly and what is proper use cases. For example, using AI to take a test for you, that's not proper use case, but using it maybe to put in a summary is. But there's not really been a discussion of how do we, not only because there's been a lot about how do we implement this tool, but not about how do we educate people on using it, especially as historically college resources are underused. We talked about the Career Center and things. It's available and it's there, and yet a lot of students don't use it, even if it would help them. So how do we make sure that it's not only accessible, but it's also they're using it correctly and that they know about it? And because that's a historic issue of not only providing the resources, but having people actually use the resources.
Very cool. So, using AI every day, these questions were generated through Copilot, so thank you. And one of my questions that Copilot lovingly gave me was loaded question, so be prepared. If you could see AI solve one global challenge in your lifetime, what would it be?
It's like asking if you had 3 wishes, or only one wish. Your first wish is, can I have 1,000,000 wishes, right? So, well, if I answer, I think there are many global challenges, but I think one that, if this is solved, that would help solve a lot, many other challenges, is improving our ability to understand science. Yeah, it's difficult, right? Identifying what is a p-value and how to it's just not easy to explain. So misunderstanding of science, I think, is at the root of bad decision-making and electing bad leaders. Electing leaders that don't understand science is a tragedy, because then they end up deciding things that at least it would be more optimal with people who understood that evidence-based decisions are likely to be better. As humanity evolved, developed the scientific method precisely because it helped us survive. But that is not very clear right now. Many people are afraid of science because they feel they love their religion. If science can't prove the evidence, it doesn't find evidence for their God or for whatever the religious beliefs, then they distrust science. They go like, oh, you can't show what I want to believe? Then go away, science must be wrong. Well, we need to bridge that. We need to be able to clarify, and people need to understand science better. I think this would be a great use. If there was one thing that I think, that would be it. Simplifying the understanding of science.
Well, I don't think that it will really solve anything, because let's be real, there is no silver bullets. There is no one solve-all solutions. Everything will have to be a combination of things. And honestly, there's also a real possibility that AI will just make things worse. AI is a system that uses a large amount of power, a large amount of resources, and we're in an environmental crisis where one of the issues is that we're running out of resources. So it can, and there's also other things, AI can be very easily integrated into surveillance technology of being able to monitor a lot of people. There's a lot of instances where AI can make global issues worse instead of better. So I think that it's, when we're considering what can it do, like I said, I don't think it can it will solve anything in the sense of no one solution will ever solve any problem. But it's also the fact that this technology can make things worse. So we have to consider both sides of that coin of it's not just a good, everything is great thing. There's going to be things that when we use these tools are going to make problems worse, are going to make systemic issues worse, and ingrain them more into our societies because that's what they can do. It's just pattern recognition, and if it recognizes racism, it will perpetuate that. So we need to really consider it when we use these tools of will it actually do what we want to accomplish?
So I think for me, I'm going to answer this from a place of not necessarily solve, but from a place of, as you've mentioned, improve. And, as I think about my own research portfolio, it is really centered in notions of love and cultural humility. And as we look around society today, we are in polarizing times. Global wars and conflicts. There's a lot of divide. So as I think about, from an aspirational perspective, from a place of hope, I could see this tool. My hope is that it can improve how we interact with and make sense of one another. To learn more from a place of humility, the values, the cultures, the beliefs, not from a place of we all have to agree, but from a place of understanding and, as was mentioned earlier, curiosity. So that's how I would answer, from a place, an aspirational place of hope and, humility.
Yeah, I love that. If I were to add on that, if we can start with that as our goal, that we understand each other, our dreams and desires and fears and challenges, and we use that to connect with each other better, but then on top of that, start to look at scientific ways that we can improve things like access to healthcare, education, politics, the economy, just frankly, well-being. How do we, as a collective society, work toward those goals with that mutual understanding? I don't think we're going to solve that, and it's not going to be technology that solves that. But if we think of the way that we build a technology that is very good at pattern recognition and using just a crazy number of data points to come up with solutions, maybe the data points that we should be pointing at are related to how do we work together and understand each other and build societies that work better for all of us.
Thank you. I have tons of questions, but I do want to make it an interactive panel. So if at any time anyone in the audience has a question, if you line up by the stairs, I'll come to you and let you ask your question. So in the meantime, I'll just keep yapping away. But if you have a question, please come to the side so that way you can have your voice heard, because we'd love to hear from you as well. On a funner, brighter note, I hope, how did you first get involved with AI? What drew you to AI, whether you were a student or in a academic or field setting?
About 10 years ago, I remember I was a member of the Pacific Council in International Policy. And I mean, even before that, I remember thinking already about these things, but they were really raising an alarm of, I imagined that self-driving cars would have taken over by now. I imagined 5 years ago it would be a reality and that parking lots would disappear. I imagined that changes would have been much faster than they have been. But I also remember, this was 10 years ago, a group of students who I teach research methods and statistics and social psychology, blah, blah, blah. But in some of my classes, students need to do an empirical project, and I sometimes give them a list of possible projects to get them inspired, because they can't think of what topic to investigate. And I remember 10 years ago having artificial intelligence, thinking about, the robotization or the automatization or automation, I think we called it. And there was very little awareness 10 years ago. So this has increased exponentially. This semester, I did not propose it, and students came up with the idea on their own. So there's a big change. Of course, people are now much more aware, even though changes have been slower than I anticipated. I don't think universities are preparing, at least not every department, preparing the workforce of the future for this reality. I think we need to be much more proactive in, like, I'm surprised still now many of my students say they have never taken a class in coding, and that is dangerous. I know that private universities are doing that, and we should too. Talk too much.
I only recently got into the field of AI. I took a philosophy class, and that was one of the topics that we discussed in that class. And now I'm a part of the CCEP Fellows. And this semester is on the topic of AI and AI ethics. So that's how I got into it. And we've been really discussing about the issues, especially when it comes, especially with generative AI and the effects that they've had on our society.
Yeah, for me, my previous job was as an industry researcher, mostly around aspects of risk and compliance and ethics. So probably just about 10 years ago, maybe a little bit more, AI started to come into the conversation around business technology and how businesses might adopt these kind of algorithms. So at the time, I was writing more about things like accessibility, corporate social responsibility, sustainability, maybe a little bit like privacy and security. But we started then to recognize that this was a eventual trend that companies would have to start thinking about what are the risks, what are the potential compliance implications, and then eventually what would be the ethical implications as well.
And I'll just add, I think for me, I'm going to go back many, many, many years to high school. I went to a math and science academy, and I was a part of the robotics club. And that was kind of my just first moment of, wow, eyes wide open, and we did competitions nationally, but just this thought way back then around building something that could even make, at that time, a basket in terms of basketball was just eye-opening of technology and just the future and what that could mean and what that could look like. And one of my favorite shows growing up was The Jetsons. So that was like the first initial, like, huh? And then I look at from The Jetsons to today and self-driving cars, and it's just how far we've come in so long. But so that was kind of the first aha moment for me, and then allowed me to really dream and imagine of what else is out there? What else don't I know? So that was kind of my first memory or exposure.
Ew, I love it. All right, we got some questions. Thank you guys for being so brave. If anyone else has questions, come on up. So come on up, maybe.
So, hi, I am Aganzam. I study here, Digital Supply Chain Management. So my question for you is in regards to ethics, right? We keep on saying it has to be fair, but for who? Who is talking about this? Because I've been following AI the past 2 years, and it's overwhelming what's happening. I feel like most of these discussions right now, we're getting into business models and the founders, intellectual properties. But I was born in the Congo, right? And when I started using AI, one of the things that stood out for me, it was that I could actually go back home and teach children using AI, English, right? They can use AI to pronounce it right. I can help women in the markets to learn about finance, right? I can forecast and give them real-time information. I'm just worried that we are moving into an era where we, again, from the top north, like I call it, talking about who is gonna benefit from it, right? It costs $20 to subscribe to ChatGPT. Some people are living for $1 a day. So where is the ethical part in this? Who's benefiting from this? Can I get some comments to that? And one last thing I want to address, Anton, thank you so much today. You said something amazing, is you are using AI for the plant, you have to identify plants. That's actually technology I can take back to my village to teach people what they can eat. Because people have mobile phones, they have internet, so they can actually distinguish between plants they can eat and what they cannot eat. So thank you for that.
I think that is the most important question we can ask around any technology is who's building it, who is it for, who's making the decision, who gets the benefit. And I feel like, I mean, you made the point earlier that a lot of times this is, when we say collaboration, it's using AI on behalf of somebody, and that's wrong, right? We should be thinking, how do we design, conceive of, design, develop, implement, and operate this together? Who's benefiting from it? Who's making the decisions? So it's not us saying we're going to bring technology to this village, to this country, to this population. We're saying we're going to give them decision-making power and investment, and we're going to work with them to build the thing that they want, and we're going to let them own it, and they're going to benefit from it. And I think until we can have that kind of conversation and that kind of process, we're going to keep running into challenges around the bias and unfairness, lack of transparency, lack of accountability. I love the question. I think if we could spend our time on nothing else, it would be solving that aspect of the technology life cycle.
But Chris, can I ask a question as a follow-up to her? But then who are the owners? It sounds like it's a matter of power, right?
It is absolutely a matter of power, yeah. And I don't know how to solve that. But the idea that a very large company is just going to walk into a population and say, look, we made this thing for you, go have at it. And by the way, there's a small subscription that we're going to charge you along the way. I don't think that's the model, right? I think there are other ways that we can build a model that's going to be workable for, hopefully for as many people as possible, but especially the people that have been struggling.
Yeah, I think it's really important to highlight because these are all extending from historical disparities, right? The global south has always been behind on technology just because of capitalism and exploitation, where these areas were not allowed access to these technologies. So it's going to be a really hard question, and especially now because we see most of AI development is happening in private corporations, and to them, they're going to put these tools in places where they think they're going to make a profit, and not really where it might be most useful.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your question.
I hear that in the past, business schools had their model was the benefit of society had to be considered, not only the profit of the shareholders. But this changed with Reagan, right? That the business school at Harvard was asked to change their syllabus. In their syllabus, they changed directly what was the purpose of business. So it was no longer the benefit of society. That's the problem. We have to go back to making that more important than the profit of your shareholders. But is that even possible?
I mean, we could talk about the East India Spice Company, and there are companies going back several hundreds of years that had the same kind of mentality. We are going to go elsewhere, we're going to extract resources, we're going to build something, and we're going to profit, and it's going to be the owners that profit. So I don't think that's nothing new necessarily, but now we have this really powerful technology, and we're talking about this techno-optimism. We're building this kind of utopia using AI, and it's going to be beneficial for everybody. If we mean that, I think there are ways that we can maybe change some of the rules of our economy, our society, so we can work better together. Yeah.
Hi there, thank you for coming. I'm Elizabeth Zingenberg. I'm a graduate student over across the street over at the solar panels for regenerative studies. And maybe I'll see if I can incorporate some AI into my defense next month. We'll see. But like, this is really cool, all the things we got to work with. So my question for you guys is, especially probably for Anton, is do you think we'll see something like Star Trek, like within our lives or within your life?
Did you say like Star Trek in our lives? I don't really know. I'm not good at future predicting, but maybe it's possible.
I mean, I'm going to go back to my Jetsons example growing up. Never in my life did I think that something like the Jetsons could actually happen in my own lifetime. And, I hope, I still have many more years left. So just to think about what technological advancements, and as long as I've been here, and again, I remember taking my mother's, Waymo or the self-driving car, and I took my mother, I said, okay, we're gonna go to the store, and she refused to get in the car, and oh no, this is not natural. And, to think about her generation growing up in the 1950s, from 1950s to self-driving cars. So if we fast forward 30, 40, 50 years from now, I mean, who knows what society will look like. I don't know if it will be Star Trek, but, who knows?
I just feel like the transporter's a long way off. Otherwise, we're okay.
Awesome. I know we've got a few minutes, but I still want to make sure we get some questions in. So our next question.
Hello, panel. My name is Roya Saleh, and I was a computer science grad from Cal Poly. I got into graduate school, but then I dropped out to build my own AI solution. So I thought that maybe I can contribute a little bit of my insights from what I have learned so far. To me, AI is nothing more than, it cannot be better than its training data sets. So if the data is not really wide, then, and it doesn't cover all aspects of, it cannot really make an interpretation or make a prediction. So I used to go to websites like Stack Overflow. We called it crowd wisdom. So to ask a question, I would go there, ask a question, hoping the wisdom of the crowd will give me the right answer. This is happening with AI. We are hoping we gather as much as data we can, and we are hoping that we are tapping into that crowd wisdom, because we believe if we have this vast information, ultimately the weight is toward the correct answer. So that's how I see how AI works. So to me is withholding information from getting into these AI system will actually damage the system, because now we get the completely biased data. And if we have a biased data, we cannot really rely on the output of this AI. So one way to me is like to contribute. If we really want an unbiased data, to me, it's not to moderate that data, it's to gather more data. It is like, at least from the experience I have, this is what I got into. And I, generally speaking, I use AI day to day, every day. There are so many open sources available, and I do not pay for it. I use open source AI. And I see some people are mad at big companies. I'm not a fan of huge companies. I'm a little person trying to get into a business. But here's the thing, there are open sources available. Why don't we talk about companies who created these open sources and made it available to anybody? I am using it on a daily basis. And I use it for my company to power it up. So here's the thing. I'm not here really to advocate 100%. In a way, I like it. But I know there are so many problems. One problem is evaluations. So once we use, I like many times all of you mentioned that we should keep our curiosity. And I think this is the main point, this is how I use it. I ask a question, and if the question comes out, and I ask, can you justify this question? And I go through it, and I argue with AI exactly the same way that I argue with my colleague if I was in the school, in the classroom. And I do not take that for granted, the answer, because I know the answer relates to the data that it was fed into. So if I keep that curiosity, if I keep my open mind that this is as good as its data that it was fed in, so I will keep questioning it. And as long as I keep questioning it, I will eventually come up with the right answer that I think it is correct.
I'm being told it's time. So for the people that have questions, I hope that you can hang around with her afterwards, after we do all this shindig, that you can ask your questions. Unfortunately, we're out of time, but I want to thank you. But please make sure you ask our panel questions. Thank you. Thank you so much to our panelists. Your insights are so appreciative.